Welcome back to our podcast. This is One Nation, One Justice. I'm Jim Carmichael. Thank you for joining me, and let's get into today's broadcast. Today, we're going to discuss the mind, the body, and behavior. What happens inside comes home. We have repeated that statement throughout our discussion of prison reform because it is one of the simplest truths we need to understand. Most of the men and women we incarcerate will eventually be released. And when they are, we should ask a very important question. What kind of person are we sending home? Today I want to talk about something that is often overlooked when we discuss criminal justice: the connection between the mind, the body, and behavior. Because behavior does not exist in isolation. What a person does is influenced by how that person thinks. Thinking is affected by emotional stability. Emotional stability can be affected by physical health, environment, trauma, addiction, education, and years of learned behavior. All of these things are interconnected. And if we genuinely expect incarceration to produce behavioral change, then we have to address the things that influence behavior. When someone enters prison, we restrict that person's liberty. But restricting liberty does not automatically change the way a person thinks. A man can spend 5 years in prison and leave thinking exactly as he did when he entered, or perhaps worse. The calendar moved, but his thinking didn't. This is one of the fundamental problems with a correctional philosophy based primarily upon punishment. Time served is not the same thing as change accomplished. People enter correctional systems carrying all kinds of problems with them. Some have untreated mental health conditions. Some have substance dependencies. Some have histories of trauma. Some have terrible nutritional habits. Some have never developed physical discipline. Some have very low education. And many were never taught some of the basic emotional and social skills that others learned while growing up. If we ignore all those things, lock someone in a cell for a number of years, and then release that person, what exactly have we corrected? Incarceration can restrict behavior for a period of time, but incarceration alone does not recognize thought. Lasting reform requires structured intervention. Let's begin with physical health. It may seem strange to discuss exercise and nutrition when talking about prison reform, but the body and mind are not separate machines. Physical condition affects mental clarity. Mental stability affects emotional regulation, and emotional regulation affects decision-making. Regular exercise requires discipline. Proper nutrition supports physical and mental health. Adequate medical care allows health problems to be addressed rather than simply ignored. These things are not luxuries. They are part of creating an environment in which change can occur. If we want a person to develop discipline, then give him opportunities to practice discipline. If we want someone to learn responsibility, create an environment in which responsible behavior is expected and reinforced. If we want people to return to society capable of making better decisions, then prison should be a place where making better decisions is taught and practiced. Mental health is equally important. Depression, anxiety, trauma, addiction, and distorted patterns of thinking do not disappear simply because a prison door closes. A person may have spent years developing unhealthy ways of responding to stress. Perhaps anger became his answer to fear. Perhaps violence became his answer to disrespect. Perhaps drugs became his answer to emotional pain. Perhaps denial became his answer to responsibility. Those patterns may help us understand behavior, but understanding them does not excuse criminal behavior. That distinction is important. Rehabilitation does not eliminate accountability. It strengthens accountability, because real accountability is more than saying, You did something wrong, so now you will suffer. Real accountability also requires a person to understand. What did I do? Who did I hurt? Why do I respond the way I do? What must I change? And perhaps most importantly, what am I going to do differently the next time I face the same situation? That is where correction can begin becoming something more than confinement. Consider emotional regulation. Not everyone learned how to manage anger constructively. Not everyone learned how to resolve disagreement peacefully. Not everyone learned how to experience frustration without becoming violent. Not everyone learned how to handle rejection. Not everyone learned how to accept criticism. And not everyone learned how to accept responsibility without either collapsing emotionally or immediately blaming somebody else. We sometimes assume these are abilities everyone simply possesses, but they aren't. Many of them are learned skills. And if they were never learned, they can be taught. That is what rehabilitation should do. Teach, train, practice, measure progress, then practice again, train the mind, train the body, train emotional responses, train communication, train conflict resolution, train responsibility. Because if we expect disciplined behavior after release, it makes very little sense to wait until release to begin teaching discipline. Think about what we expect from someone leaving prison. We expect that person to obey the law. We expect him to find employment. We expect him to manage money. We expect him to interact appropriately with supervisors and coworkers. We expect him to deal with family problems. We expect him to handle rejection. We expect him to resist drugs. We expect him to control anger. We expect him to resolve conflict without violence, and we expect him to make responsible decisions. And sometimes we expect all of this from a person who has spent years in an environment that did very little to teach or reinforce those abilities. Then, when he fails, we say, "See, prison didn't change him." Perhaps we should ask a different question. What did we actually do to help him change? This is why structured programming is not indulgence, it is preparation. There is nothing soft about expecting someone to exercise discipline every day. There is nothing soft about requiring education. There is nothing soft about addiction treatment. There is nothing soft about confronting destructive thinking. There is nothing soft about learning to control anger instead of allowing anger to control you. And there is certainly nothing soft about accepting responsibility for the damage your decisions have caused. Those things require work, and that work should begin while a person is incarcerated. The purpose is not simply to make prisons more comfortable. The purpose is to make our communities safer. Imagine two people returning to the same neighborhood. One returns with the same anger, the same addiction, the same unhealthy thinking, the same inability to manage conflict, and perhaps even greater resentment than when he entered prison. The other returns with improved physical health, greater emotional control, healthier coping mechanisms, clearer thinking, vocational skills, and a demonstrated ability to accept responsibility. Each person gives that community the better chance of remaining safe. That is why prison conditions and rehabilitation are not merely issues affecting incarcerated people. They are public safety issues. We say we want safer communities, and we do. But one of the most practical places to begin building safer communities is inside the institutions from which thousands of people will eventually return to those communities. And quite frankly, it's not thousands, it's millions. We should not measure correction merely by the number of years someone spent behind a wall. We should also ask what changed while that person was there. Did thinking improve? Did emotional control improve? Was addiction addressed? Were healthier habits developed? Did the person learn useful skills? Did responsibility increase? Is there measurable evidence that this person is better prepared to live successfully and lawfully than we entered? Those are questions a correctional system should be able to answer. And so far, we've put all this responsibility on others. But what about the responsibility we face? Is it not our responsibility to make sure those things are happening, those positive changes are occurring? And should we not change our minds and our opinions, our emotions first? Quit looking for revenge and punishment alone, but look for the future, how we're going to return that person to society as one of us or as one of those who will again commit a crime. Because eventually the gate opens, the person walks out, and whatever we developed inside that institution comes with him. That is why One Nation, One Justice believes rehabilitation must address the whole person, the mind, the body, the emotions, the habits, the skills, and ultimately the behavior. If we neglect those foundations, we should not be surprised when instability returns to our neighborhoods. If we address them intelligently, consistently, and seriously, we give rehabilitation a genuine opportunity to work, because we have accepted the responsibility of making that happen. And in doing so, we give our communities a better opportunity to be safe, because this truth remains. What happens in prison does not stay in prison. It comes home. This is One Nation, One Justice. Before we can change laws, we must first change minds. So thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.